Boom, let's do it. Well, how can Christians be thought leaders in a world where most people don't seem too interested in thinking? Well, we will get into that, but first, let me just encourage you guys to do this. Give us a like and a subscribe and a share and a follow and a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're on there if you think that we are earning it. And that really does help the channel out more than you know. It's free to you, and it really helps get this out, push it out to more folks who might be able to benefit from some worldview training, some Bible training, some things like that. A lot of people are, traveling and things like that. They want to stay connected to biblical theology and that kind of thing. A lot of people are homesick sometimes. They can't gather with the body of believers that they love so very, very much. And so what they do is they bridge that gap in human gathering with digital content, and the podcast space is where all this is happening right now. YouTube, where all of this is happening right now. So if you give a like and subscribe, you help us reach people rather than some sources that might not be so solid, because the internet is the Wild West, kind of like this episode. We're going all over the place today in this episode. So we're going to begin with Proverbs, because we got to get ourselves centered in some wisdom before we answer some Bible questions, because we don't want to answer foolishly, and by we I mean me. Let's do some stuff here. Proverbs chapter 9, verses 7 through 10. Little glitch there. I think that lady's voice cracked. All right. Proverbs 9, 7 through 10 says this: "Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, and whoever reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight." All right. So basically the principle is this: you get more of what you have, right? So Jesus said it this way: to him who has, more will be given. To him who does not have, even what he does have will be taken away. So if somebody has lots of wisdom, then everything that you tell him, even if it's correction, it'll get turned into more wisdom. It'll get filtered into wisdom and drop into the system in that way. If someone has high degrees of foolishness, everything that you tell him will end up kind of reinforcing it, right? We all have this experience with ourselves and with others where you can hand somebody solid gold and it ends up reinforcing the intellectual dung that was already in there somehow. It's like, that's amazing. How did you get that out of what I said? And yet there it is. So even if you're trying to help them, you will end up reinforcing their foolishness. So you can think of wisdom and foolishness like this: less as things that you have and more like filters that you learn through. So wisdom is a filter, and you can picture it with like nice square holes, crisp edges, everything that you push through there. When you squeeze information through the filter of wisdom, it ends up being in the shape of wisdom. You can build things out of it. It's stackable, it's combinable, right? It's usable, all that information that comes in. Foolishness is a filter with holes in it, with random sizes and random shapes and scraggly edges that don't really cut clean. And so you shove information through the filter of foolishness, and it ends up being a useless pile of junk on the floor on the other side of the filter that can't get used for anything productive. Chris Nolte had a really good analogy for this, and I'm kind of expanding on what he said, but basically his way of thinking about it was like this. He says, let's say you got a buddy who's about to buy a car, and you can't talk him out of it. What do you tell him once he's already bought the car, right? So let's expand on that. Let's say you've got two buddies. You've got Wise Willie and you got Foolish Freddie, and both of them are thinking about buying a really, really nice sports car. They're going to go and get a silver Corvette, and you tell both of them, hey, Wise Willie, Foolish Freddie, sorry. You guys actually can't afford that right now. Like, you're still young. You got to accumulate some assets first. Your kids need this and that. Like, your wife is trying to get this house thing all worked out. Maybe this isn't the best time to buy the car, right? Well, Wise Willie is going to come back to you and say, I needed to hear that, bro. Thanks. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. Got caught up in the moment with that beautiful car. And you say, hey, I totally get it. Fist bumps, and we go and grab a drink together, right? But then Foolish Freddie, he goes and buys the car anyway. Now, here's the question. Once he buys the car and he pulls up to your house and he peels in, kind of like drifts into your house, and he honks the horn, he's like, hey, loser, get out here. Let's take a ride. And you go outside and you see that he bought the car that you told him not to buy. The question then is, what do you say? Now, Freddie's a nice guy, but he's foolish. He's kind of a dingbat, right? So what do you say? And what Chris Nolte was saying was, you don't tell him, man, you bought the car? You shouldn't have bought the car, man. Like, I told you, now this is going to happen and that's going to happen. He says, instead what you tell him is, nice car. You try to keep him from buying the car, and if you can't keep him from buying the car, you just say, nice car. Now, obviously, if they're doing something that is morally reprehensible or harmful to others or something like that, you don't want to affirm that behavior. But the point is very clear. In the end, you just kind of let fools do their thing, because if you wrap your arms around them, you bear hug them too much, they're just going to drag you down, because foolishness is heavier than any of us. So I'm not saying that we got to cut them loose just because they're fools. I'm just saying that when you give somebody counsel from the Word of God, you are participating with them on their journey, right? And there is a time to stop participating with them on their journey, because they are dedicated to going to foolish places. And anything you add is just going to add fuel to that fire. So, give instruction to a wise man, he will be wiser still. Wise Willie is going to thank you for talking some sense into him, because we all need that from time to time, right? But whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, and he who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Eventually, Foolish Freddy is going to be a little less prone to call you. He's not going to want to go out and play pickleball with you anymore, because he's going to want to drive his car, and he knows that you don't approve. And even just the knowledge that you might at some point have had a disapproving thought about his foolish decision is enough to make a fool shrink back and not want to be around you, because it's uncomfortable for somebody to be around who knows that you're being foolish. It's kind of a guilty conscience thing. So, of course, Christians will do foolish things from time to time. But I promise you this, they'll do fewer on average than they did last year. Why? Because we grow in wisdom. Right? We have the Holy Spirit of God in us. He is our counselor. He is our guidance. We have the scriptures. We can hear the voice of the shepherd. And so Christians grow in wisdom. So verse 10, it says, where'd you go now? Come on, verse 10. There you are. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. So if you know God, you're going to lean towards wisdom, increasingly so over time. It's like, like the foolish activity that we used to do before we knew Christ, it ends up getting redeemed, and it gets kind of rolled into this momentum of increasing wisdom, because we have Christ, and 1 Corinthians 1 verse 30 says that Christ is our wisdom. So the system works. Follow Christ, gain wisdom. And there is the break. All right, guys. So, like I said, give us a like and a subscribe. You can also text your questions in, because we're going to get to some Bible questions now. So you can text your questions into 509-867-0070. We got some randos today, and we're going to get to it. Let's do it. All right, let's see. Here's the first one. These are in no particular order. Is the church the new Israel? All right, good question there. Is the church the new Israel? I'm going to grab my Bible. Ooh, first, a drink of water. Call me crazy. I love hot water. It's weird, right? It's weird. I know. Some people are like, it's gross. It's just like tasteless. I don't think so. I used to drink coffee too late in the day, because I like to drink coffee while I'm studying. And if I was reading late in the day, I'm sipping on coffee, right? Well, then I end the day feeling all like jittery and depleted and like whatever. So I just switched to hot water, after a certain time in the morning, and now I end the day feeling hydrated and energized and ready to rock. All right. Romans 11 is where I'm going to go for this one. Let's hit up Romans 11. Is the church the new Israel? I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but we're going to get into some stuff here. All right. So Paul is talking about exactly this. Anytime we're going to have a conversation about replacement theology, me personally, I really like to center that discussion on Romans 11, not because I want to prioritize one scripture above another one, but just because I think Paul specifically wrote this to address this situation. There's a church in Rome. It's mostly Gentile, but they've got Jews running around because it's Rome. It's a big city. And so the church is Gentile, also Jewish. And they got to figure out how to work these relationships out with two parties that used to be opposed to each other, but now in the gospel, according to Ephesians 2, Christ has diluted or disintegrated the dividing wall between us, and he himself is our peace, and he made both groups into one. And yet, the Jews are still a very distinct ethnic and racial group with heritage and traditions, and they've got these promises in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament. So, how are we supposed to see all these promises to the Jews? Well, one response to that, or one solution to this question, is called replacement theology. I'll explain it in a minute, but replacement theology is a relatively new term, but the idea is not new. People have been questioning these things for a long time. So Paul writes Romans 11. It's really chapters 9, 10, and 11, but we're just going to focus on 11 for now. He says this, I ask then, has God rejected his people, meaning ethnic Israel? By no means. For I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. So in other words, he's like, if God has rejected the Jews, you got to explain how you got a saved Jew named the Apostle Paul running around. Obviously, God is paying attention to Jews, at least on some level. So here he goes. Do you not know what the scripture says of Elijah, how he appeals to God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets. They have demolished your altars. And I alone am left, and they seek my life. But what is God's reply to him? Quote, I have kept for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. End quote. Verse 5, so at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. But if by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works, otherwise grace would no longer be grace. What then? Israel failed to obtain what it was seeking. The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened, as it is written. God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that would not see and ears that would not hear, down to this very day. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, and a stumbling block and a retribution for them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they cannot see, and bend their backs forever. So what he's saying here is God has not cast away ethnic Israel because the Jews, by and large, rejected Jesus, right? Like the Jewish Messiah showed up to the Jews and said, I'm your Messiah, and they went ahead and killed him. Now, the Roman power structure, like the political structure, also killed him, so there's a lot of blame to go around, but here we're just talking about Israel. We're talking about the Jews. They rejected their Messiah with a few exceptions, really just 11 exceptions. It was the 12 apostles minus, Judas, and then it kind of grew from there. So, since they rejected Christ, did God reject them? And Paul's saying, no, there's still a remnant in the same as it was in the days of Elijah. There's still a remnant. There are faithful Jews out there. It's a minority of Jewish people, but the remnant is there. And you may not see them. Elijah may not have seen them, but God sees them, and he knows the ones that are his. Now, on the rest of them, there's been a judgment. There's been a hardening. All right. So then verse 11, so I ask, did they stumble in order that they might fall? Meaning, have they failed conclusively? Is it over for them? By no means. Rather, through their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? Now, I'm speaking to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles. I magnify my ministry in order somehow to make my fellow Jews jealous, and thus save some of them. So he basically says, I'm still going after the Jews here. I'm just, I gotta focus on the Gentiles because that's my mission from God at the moment. But I'm really hoping that my ministry to the Gentiles winds up actually waking up the Jews, and thus save some of them. Verse 15, for if their rejection means the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead? Now, he keeps talking about this future restoration, this future acceptance of Israel. And so he goes on from there. Let's go down to verse 25. Lest you be wise in your own sight, I do not want you to be unaware of this mystery, brothers. A partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. All right, so basically God has hardened, partially hardened, or mostly maybe even we would say, hardened the Jews. So it's going to be harder for Jews to accept their Messiah now. There's like a spiritual weight that he put on them that makes them harder. It makes it harder for them to turn their necks and repent and follow Christ. And he's focusing mostly on the Gentiles. So there's Gentiles getting added to the church like crazy. But he does say until, right? So this is a phase of history. The mission to the Gentiles is kind of a phase of missions history, and we're in that phase right now. 26, and in this way all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will banish ungodliness from Jacob, and this will be my covenant with them when I take away their sins. So, and he goes on from there. So basically, what the Apostle Paul is saying here is, God has not cast away Israel. I don't want you to think that the church has replaced Israel. Instead, we're just in this phase of history where he seems not to be focusing on them, but there's a future in God's plan where Israel is actually grafted back into the tree that the branch was cut off from. They are restored, and there's going to be a massive revival among the Jews where all Israel that is alive at the time will be saved. So the alternative to this is called replacement theology, right? The church has replaced Israel. And in extreme replacement theology, they'll say that that all of the promises in the Bible, in the Old Testament, all of the promises that were for Israel have now been inherited by the church down to the minutia. And so there's a lot of like amillennialism in this. Like amillennialism sort of has replacement theology sort of wrapped up into it because it's very comfortable, or partially because it's very comfortable with allegorizing things. And so they'll take the Old Testament promises regarding land and regarding like, actual national revival, and they'll find spiritual significance in these things, kind of allegorize them beyond what I think is correct. And then they'll apply those things to the church. And so they'll say that the church inherits the spirit of the promises, or they inherit the actual promises from Israel, but they're fulfilled in the spirit of the prophecy, not in the actual literal, point by point details of the prophecy. Me, I just can't get there, to be honest. I think when I look at Romans 11, I'm like, it seems that God's not done with ethnic Israel. It seems that he's outlining a future here. He uses words like until and future and all Israel will be saved and things like that. Like I don't think when he talks about Israel, you can just say, oh, he's talking about the church, because he's distinguishing them from Gentile believers. So yeah, it seems to me that God is not done with Israel. Now, replacement theology, not my jam. I'm not into it, but it's also not crazy. I understand where it came from. And I really want to be careful, because people who are not into replacement theology, like, I don't know. I don't even know what you would call my camp. It's not like, I'm not a dispensationalist in the sense that like old school, hardcore, classical dispensationalism will say that there's basically two ways to God. In fact, some guys have actually come out and said this, like Zane Hodges said this, which is insane. He shouldn't have. Say there's two ways to God. You can either believe in Christ or you can be a Jew, right? It's like, okay, that's called heresy. You can't say that, right? But I want to be careful, because we sort of get pitted against each other. Either you're a replacement theologian or you're a dispensationalist. And I'm not a dispensationalist, but I'm not a replacement theologian either. So I don't know if you could call like replacement theology, if you could call my stance embracement theology, maybe. Like here's Christ, and he has embraced the Gentiles, and he will re-embrace Israel. And there's a remnant in here who's already embraced, and then there's the elect Gentiles that are already embraced. Like, it's just kind of the way I see the story playing out here. But yeah, I want to be careful not to say that amillennialism is biblically unfaithful or insane. I think they go too far. Not amillennialism. Rewind. I want to be careful not to say that replacement theology is biblically wrong or like heretical or insane. It's not. The reason that people arrive at this conclusion is because there's so much emphasis in the Bible on the church participating in the plans for Israel. So for example, Romans chapter 4, right? In the same book, he says there that if you worship the God of Abraham, you are of the people of Abraham. And so there's like this leveling out that happens, right? Galatians 3, he says there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's not even male nor female. Everybody's equal before the cross. And so it would seem like there's an erasing of these categories and distinctions, and it's all just now about the church. But I really, honestly, I don't know what you do with Romans 11 in that situation. And so I think that also, historically, I think there was good reason for this. So you take a guy like Augustine back in the late 300s, early 400s, he really articulated replacement theology very well. He's kind of one of the founding fathers of systematizing this form of theology. And with his place in history and his context, it makes perfect sense. There really was no state of Israel as such. There was no gathering place for the Jews then. I mean, there was a historical Jewish land, but I mean, it was hotly contested all the time. He was at the tail end of the Roman Empire, and there really wasn't a physical geographial inheritance for the Jews, like, to speak of at all. And so what you've got is just kind of Jews scattered out through everywhere, but there was no cohesive unit of Jewishness, of Israelitehood. It wasn't an entity that you could like point at and describe and track and measure and things like that. So in the absence of a state of Israel, he's looking at the Old Testament and he's seeing all these promises to Israel, and it's like, well, how are those going to be fulfilled? We know God is faithful, but there's no target left for this blessing, right? So who does that go to? And then you see all these passages like Philippians 1 and 2, somewhere in there. He says, beware of the false circumcision. Maybe it's 3, I forget. We are the true circumcision, meaning the church, those who have believed in Jesus. So he sees these passages, and it's like, and he sees Galatians 4, where if we're the children of the promise, then we are the children of Abraham. He's like, okay, the church is the new Israel. So it makes sense from his perspective. Now, since then, we've had a lot of time to discuss these things, debate these things, and not to mention in 1948, there was kind of a reestablishment of a land of Israel, right? So now we even have, as if it was necessary for God to fulfill his promises, is not, but now we even have a place where these prophecies can be fulfilled. Like the stage is set for these biblical prophecies to be fulfilled in a way that it wasn't when Augustine was around articulating this stuff. So I understand replacement theology. I appreciate a lot of those guys. A lot of my favorite pastors and preachers and authors and theologians are into replacement theology. So I disagree at my own peril, because usually when I disagree with these guys, I'm wrong. I just don't see it. When I read Romans 11, I think there's a future for Israel, which I think means no, the church has not replaced Israel. We've been added to it. We've been embraced into God's plan for Israel. We are spiritual Israel. He has not done away with ethnic Israel, and he still has spiritual plans for them as well. All right. Next one. Given that the expert class just let us down so hard, I think that's a reference to COVID, maybe. Given that the expert class just let us down so hard, how does a responsible citizen interact with the marketplace of ideas now? I'm concerned that since COVID, oh yeah, there it is. I should have read that earlier. The reaction has been to silo ourselves within our own worldviews and not communicate. I'm pretty sure the Bible doesn't prescribe this approach. So if Christianity is going to be the thought leaders, if Christians are going to be the thought leaders, what's our approach to the current situation? Okay. A long time ago, I actually transcribed that question down based on a conversation I was having with somebody. So, yeah, the context here is basically, boy, I'd completely forgotten about this. See, this is why I should not write any notes before I do these things, because I write them and then I forget about them and then I pick them up. Basically, the context here was, all right, so one of the things that went wrong during COVID was the expertocracy, right? It was like, hey, these guys are the medical experts, just do whatever they say. And it turns out they didn't have any better of a read on the situation than average Joe on the street, and we probably should have just been left alone. They could funnel us information, and we could get all the best high-quality information out there, and then we should have been left alone to make our own decisions for what's best for us and our families. Well, COVID did not go that way. Instead, the experts became the tyrants, and the ones with power were ramming the experts down our throats and saying, you comply with this, or else you're an attempted murderer because you want to kill, the elderly and little babies and stuff. And so it got very bullyish and very, evil. All right. So given that just happened, the question here is, everybody has sort of split up and said, all right, well, I'm not going to accept dissenting information now, because last time I did, it turned out to be COVID. So we're just going to get together with these people we agree with, and we're going to hype ourselves up in these in this snowball effect of an echo chamber. There's going to be a feedback loop until we're all screaming so loud we can't even hear anybody else, and then we don't have to listen to anybody else. But then Christianity is supposed to bust in to the intellectual landscape and do the 2 Corinthians 10 thing and take every thought captive to make it obedient to Christ, and to destroy ideological strongholds, and to say things like, where is the great debater of this age? Let's go. So how can we be thought leaders when nobody wants to listen to anybody talk except for themselves? Well, to be honest, I don't know that that's actually the situation. In fact, I think that especially among younger generations, among Zoomers and so on, there is a new willingness for conversation, because liberalism, and by that I mean political liberalism, has spent, like, I'm a millennial, right? And most of my childhood, liberalism was pushing for less conversation and less dissent against groupthink and all of that kind of stuff. Christians were shamed in a lot of ways, and people with traditional values were called backwards, and you're behind the times, and you're on the wrong side of history, and you're a Puritan that wants to burn witches. I'm like, why? Because I want to get married and have a family? Yeah. It's like, if you say anything even slightly questioning the values of homosexuals, then you're a bigot and a Nazi, right? So like, we were raised with that. That was me. I'm a millennial. Like, that was my context. And for the Zoomers, it's been a lot worse in a lot of ways, right? Then COVID hits, and it's like, whoa, hold up a second. Maybe the judgment that gets rendered from on high is worth being reevaluated, and we've got the tools at our fingertips to go ahead and do that. Now, there's a lot of downsides to this when everybody's just skeptical all the time, no matter what. It's really hard to do things like have faith in Christ. But there is an upside to it, which is people are willing to question and re-question their own paradigms. which is good. Like taking in new information and evaluating things, that's a good thing in general. And so I think that we've actually got an opportunity here where conversation is probably opening up to a large degree. And I think that there's probably, now most of my predictions are wrong, but I think there's probably a short window where that's going to be the case. And we have a chance here over the next, I don't know what, let's say 5 to 10 years to really make our case to people who 10 years ago would not have considered Christianity. But we can say, look, we've got order where the world has chaos. We've got definitions where the world has randomness. We've got life and joy and flourishing where the world has skyrocketing suicide rates and boys that don't know that they're boys. Like we have an answer to what's going on here. And it's not new. It's just that you didn't listen to us for a long time, right? And I think we've got a window here to make that case because like religion in general is having a very big resurgence right now. I always get this, like, why are so many people becoming Muslims? And then at the same time, why are so many people becoming Catholics? And at the same time, why are so many people becoming Eastern Orthodox? And we just want everybody to become an evangelical Christian. And there are a lot of people becoming evangelical Christians, but religion in general is having a massive tide raising because people are just hungry for the structure. Like postmodernism just failed us. We get that now. Postmodernism's over. Like it's dead. And I'm not sure what they're going to label this group philosophy that has replaced it now, but it ain't postmodernism anymore. That's toast. So, yeah, I don't think that's true. I think Americans, I guess I can only speak for Americans. Well, Western society in general. No, that's not true. This is also happening in Latin America, where I spend a lot of time. This is also happening in Africa, parts of Asia, some more than others. Yeah, I think globally, actually, there's a movement for open conversation. So I think that Christianity really has a chance to be at the table and to make our case. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Starlink also, because as Elon puts all of the, if he actually achieves the global internet thing, you're going to have people in societies that have been isolated for a while, and all of a sudden they're going to be exposed to these thoughts today. And they will have skipped modernism and postmodernism, and they may have even skipped Marxism and things like that, and all of a sudden they're just going to be getting whatever it is that we pump out there. So I think that's, for reasons like that, it's more and more important to start shows like this. And I think Christians ought to be doing a lot of this kind of stuff and just put that stuff out into the world, right? All right. Actually, no, and I'll tell you this. My pastor, when I was growing up, he had a really interesting and accurate take on how prosperity gospel got all over the world. And what he said was, he kind of came up in the 60s, and that's where he got his education and stuff. And so he was around, well, I don't know, the 60s. Yeah. And so he really came of age, I guess, in the 70s. And so he says, now all of a sudden you got TV signals that are going everywhere, all over the world, even in poor countries. And the fundamentalists, the Bible thumpers, that's us, right? He said, we shied away from the technology. We said, we don't need that. We just need our Bibles. We need the local church, which theologically is absolutely true. That's enough for faithful Christianity. When it comes, though, to reaching the nations, when it comes to missiology, he says, we just missed the boat. But you know who didn't was the people who knew that they would get advertising dollars by going on TV. And so so the money grubbers and the professional religious establishment and the prosperity preachers and the faith healers and these guys, they jumped right onto the airwaves. And so that stuff got exported to Africa and to Latin America instantly. And that's why when sound doctrine gets there now, we're 30 years behind. And he was saying that 20 years ago. So now it's like in some of these places, they've had the prosperity preachers, the American preachers on TV for 50 years. And we're finally bringing in solid gospel. And they're like, oh my gosh, this sounds like Jesus, actually. Like, I've never heard this before. But like when I picture Jesus in the Bible that I've read, like this is much more, this aligns much more than what these guys are telling me, right? So there's this like revival of sound doctrine right now. And we've got a similar opportunity here with podcasts and with AI. And, I can take this podcast and, translate it into Mandarin, and boom, you're reaching Chinese folks. Now, I don't know if it can get into China, but there's a lot of people that speak Chinese that are not in China, So we're working on things like this, actually, at Hungry for Wisdom behind the scenes. I'm not ready to announce any of it yet, so I'm not. But we're taking a look at how we can flood, or do our part at least, to flood solid biblical content out there for people who are who have access to it now for free that they never would have before. And the options on our end, on the provider end of this discipleship, it's never been cheaper. It's never been easier. I'm a technological idiot. And look, right? It's totally doable. Now, I got a really good team of people here. Shout out to producer Tim and Paul and Erica and Robert and everybody who's, helping make this thing go. But in reality, guys, it ain't that tough. Like it's doable now without a degree and an expertise. So I think Christians are actually perfectly positioned to be the thought leaders. We just have to know how to articulate our message and then say it. Say it, right? What is that? Second Corinthians 4:13, I believe it is. I believe, therefore I spoke. There you go. 13:4. I'm going to look that up now. I'm going to steer you guys wrong. Hold on a second. This would be a good life verse for you guys. Anybody who wants to know how Christianity can compete in the marketplace. Is it 4:13 or is it 13:4? 2 Corinthians. Since we have the same spirit, 2 Corinthians 4:13. Since we have the same spirit of faith, according to what has been written, I believed, and so I spoke. We also believe, and we also speak. Just say it, baby. All right, last question for today. We got what? What do we got? Tell me. Are there any artists whose songs you guys won't sing in church, even if the content is good? How much do we have to know about a songwriter's theology before we sing their songs? Yeah, good question. To tell you the truth, we've gone back and forth on this. I'm going to speak for Micah a little bit without him being here. Sorry, bro. But me and Micah, we've talked about this before because there was a thing that blew up a few years back with Hillsong where it was like we all knew that Hillsong kind of had some sloppy theology, and we knew then we knew that their pastor Brian Houston was, it was like, oh, okay, he's a heretic. I get it. We didn't always know that at first. When Hillsong was coming out, we were like, they got some good stuff, some bad stuff. You chew the meat, you spit out the bones. What's the problem here, right? And then we realized that the undercurrent of this stuff was actually poisoned. And you start having these questions about, okay, if it's poison root, is it poison fruit also? On the other hand, some of these songs are biblically solid, right? And all truth is God's truth. And if, back to Philippians 1, even if people are preaching the gospel from wrong motives, they're still preaching the gospel, right? So what's the problem there? On the other hand, then you've got this sinister aspect where these movements, whether it's Jesus Culture and Bethel Redding, or whether it's Hillsong or Elevation Church or whatever it is, or Elevation Worship, they've got a business model where I was wondering why my ankle's been itching. There's this bug crawling around in there. Got him. There's this business model where they get into churches by getting on the radio and getting into the Christian media spaces, and then their music becomes popular, and a little bit leads to a little bit more, which leads to a little bit more, and you kind of consume from this well that you're growing accustomed to, and then boom, next thing you know, you're getting the preaching from Stephen Furtick, and you're getting you're watching the videos from Brian Houston, and he's getting paid for the clicks and so on, and so it's a money making scheme from heretical religious establishments, right? So it's like, do we even want to dip our toe in that water? And this is where the Justin Peters angle comes in on it. He's like, no, get the music out of there. Like, dude, why are you even messing around with this stuff? There's good, solid stuff that you could sing. You're not dependent on this stuff for good music. There's good music elsewhere. Go get it. And if you can't find it, write it, which I got a lot of sympathy for that position. And so at one point, me and Micah, we said, you know what? It's probably just not helpful to sing Hillsong tunes anymore. Like, even if there's nothing wrong with the lyrical content of a particular song, people know enough about Hillsong now that if they know we're singing a Hillsong tune, it might throw them off and cause them to be thinking things they don't need to be thinking. We're trying to bring people into the worship of God. And so why bother with the distraction? So we just kind of said, let's just go through and sort of weed those out. I think he still did shout to the Lord a couple of times because he's like, look, at this point, that song's 30 years old or 40 or whatever. The church owns that one. That one's ours now. So I'm like, yeah, fair enough. So that was our stance then. Let's just nix the Hillsong stuff. Now, since then, Hillsong then leads to questions about these other places, right? About elevation worship and so on. And so we just, to be honest, guys, what happened was we got tired of being the devotional police. And it was like, okay, just because somebody sent me an article once, and this might sound like an extreme situation or like anecdotal, it's not. This happens a lot. Just because somebody sent me an article that said that this person who wrote that song has incorrect doctrinal beliefs, maybe even heretical beliefs, do we now have to scrap that song, which has become dear to our community? And it's just kind of like, I just felt like I was taking part in gossip chains. Like, all right, I'm going to vet the theology of every person who puts a lyric down. Like, I just found this one out, that City of Light, they've got some phenomenal stuff, right? I just found out about this song, For His Glory and My Good. That is one of the better songs written in the last 30 years. These guys are doing excellent work. And then my buddy tells me, oh yeah, they've got a land acknowledgement on their website. I'm like, a land acknowledgement? That's one of those things now where they're, they say, we just want to acknowledge before our event starts that we're doing all of these things on land that was stolen by the white man from whatever tribe, and so they do a land acknowledgement there. And I'm like, you mean like wokeism? Like we're doing the wokeism thing? And I'm like, no, not City of Light. Like I was starting to trust these guys. And so, but it was down at the bottom of their website. And so of course, all of us that were in the room, we soundly made fun of my friend for scrolling to the bottom of the website of a worship band. We're like, how much time do you actually have? If you need some work to do, I'll give you some stuff to do. You can come help me with some stuff. But anyway, the point is, I don't have time for Christian TMZ and who believes what and who said what. I don't care. I don't care to get into the middle school girl stuff about, well, this person actually thinks this and they might write this song, but they actually I don't care. So basically where we are at right now as a church is we're applying some common sense. If something is polluted to the point of being unhelpful, get rid of it. If it's not, I don't care. We're going to lead our people to sing truth, and we will sing nothing but the truth, right? We've got very, very strict standards when it comes to the content of something. As far as tracing back the lineage of where all of that came from, if it's necessary, we'll do it. If not, it winds up being unhelpful. So I know that's not exactly a crisp and clean answer, but basically, yeah. When we have a reason to start caring, we start caring, and then until then, we just look at the content. So that's sort of where we're at on that one. Listen, guys, I want you to give us a like and subscribe. Write your questions in to 509-867-0070. And let me just say, Jesus deserves disciples.
Hungry for Wisdom is a ministry of Grace and Truth Community in West Richland, Washington. 1 John 4:19. We love him because he first loved us. If you are enjoying Hungry for Wisdom, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share it. Leave us a 5-star rating if you think we've earned it.